Welcome guys, this is Bebe872 and this shall be the Set 10 Champion BIS guide for all those TFT players out there. So in this guide, we're going to focus on exactly what itemizations work and which ones are recommended for each champion. Now, if we were to start with Annie, most fights in Set 10 last more than 15 to 20 seconds. So that means you can get at least 3 to 4 Archangel stacks. That's why Archangel Staff right now is one of the best itemizations in terms of AP damage output. Now, the logic for blue buff is if a unit does not have a clean mana threshold of 60, 75, or 90, which is 4, 5, or 6 autos, then generally it is better to give the unit a blue buff. Because blue buff now doesn't give bonus mana on takedowns, but it gives bonus damage output. Annie has blue buff because she does want to get the bonus damage output from blue buff because she can get mana from her emo synergy anyways. And that brings us to Corki, because since Corki has exactly 60 mana, which is 4 auto attacks on a very decent ultimate, you do want to give him a Shojin's. And in TFT Set 10, the combination for damage that is at the highest for all AD carries is always going to be Deathblade and IE, unless Riot wants to nerf that. Now, you'll notice that most of the 1 costs are actually build-up processes for 4 costs, and Evelynn is actually one of the more interesting variations. Evelynn can actually use every single itemization into the game for every single build-up because she has an AP ratio and an AD ratio. So in this case, for this video, we decided to go for the melee bruiser route, which is Akali, true damage Akali, or maybe crowd diver Zed, and we gave her 2 lifesteal itemizations and 1 damage/tank itemization to make it work. Jinx also shows exactly what the best AD item combination is. I would recommend going for Deathblade, IE, and Last Whispers if you want to build into an AD carry such as Samira or Miss Fortune, or maybe even Israel/Caitlyn. And Lilia is an example of how you want to build into tank carries such as Zac. Zac has a very high AP ratio while having a CC value on his ultimate. So if you were to give Zac a lot of mana gain / AP value, then he is going to have amazing sustainability. You don't want to give itemizations to unit like Cassante and Olaf. Olaf might be a bit controversial because he does and is able to use almost every itemization in the game very efficiently, but I do not think it is optimal because I do not think it's going to win you stage 2. Kennen is Guardian, and Guardians get more tank value based on their maximum HP, so you do want to give HP itemizations such as Warmogs and Sunfire Capes. Also, Kennen has a very decent a HP ratio as a main tank, so if you put Kennen in the front, give him a Crown Guard, he's going to buy time while doing some significant damage. The itemizations can also build up very easily into Set and Zac in the future. Tahm Kench is more of a niche build-up, but if you give him an AP itemization like Crown Guard, he becomes nearly unkillable for the entirety of Stage 2. Vi's itemizations are not that important, so it is most efficient to just give her a Thieves Gauntlet if you do wish to 3-star her. And Taric is a Guardian, just like Kennen, so just give him flat HP and tank itemizations, he'll do well, but usually you do want to throw him away for a better 4 costs like a tank. And Yasuo can be a carry in a true damage comp, but I do not recommend going for Yasuo whatsoever. Yasuo is very squishy, so he can get one-shotted, and the damage output of units like Zed and Akali is significantly higher than Yasuo, so it is not a composition that I do recommend players to play. Now, starting for 2 costs, we can actually choose to go for certain carries if you do manage to 3-star. 1 costs are too weak, so I don't really recommend going for 1 cost ever, but starting for 2 costs, you can actually consider a real composition. When you build into Aphelios, you do want to have Guinsooth for the attack speed and the extra damage. Aphelios is a rapid fire, so you don't need to force a Shojin's, but you can choose to make a Shojin's if you want. I always recommend going for the Deathblade IE tech because the damage output is just too significant. Now, Bard and Garen does not have good item efficiency, so you don't really want to give them the item, but Gnar definitely is a powerful unit with very high DPS and survivability and natural synergy attack speed bonus as well too, so Gnar is something that you do definitely want to consider as a carry or a good build-up potential. Gragas is a very decent 2-cost tank for the early games, but his scaling is kind of awkward. What this means is that he will be strong for stage 2 and 3, but after stage 4, even if you 3-star him, even if you give him itemizations, he's not going to be as tanky as you might expect. This is probably because his healing is fixed regardless of his AP ratio. That should be one of the causes, but regardless, he is an amazing tank paired with Seraphine. Now, Jax is an amazing EDM carry if you have the right conditions. Number one, you need to build full damage, full AP damage, so that he can one-shot your opponents. And number two, you need more EDM units. So you want to have a Lux, you want to have a Zac that can copy this Jax's ultimate and deal the bonus damage. Kai'Sa is actually one of the best build-ups in the game. You can just get a Kai'Sa 1 or a 2-star headliner and just give her Shoujins and she will do consistent damage. As I say and emphasize, IE Deathblade is one of the best item tech. You can replace the Shoujins for Last Whispers, for Armor Shred too if you want to, but usually you do want to go for flat AD scaling. And Katarina is only good as the headliner. You do not ever want to go for a non-headliner Katarina because it doesn't get the bonus headliner damage output, and the bonus headliner damage output is insane. When you build Katarina, you do want to build into full damage so that her dagger, her final dagger, can one-shot the backline. It can one-shot the backline instantly, and the composition is usually a crowd diver comp over a country composition. Kayla is a very decent like a pentakill carry. Just give her healing, which is usually Hand of Justice, and give her like a Guinsus and one more damage itemization. That is the tech. Pantheon isn't really impressive as a damage carry, so giving him damage itemizations like IE Deathblade doesn't really help you that much. But he is a Guardian, and all Guardians in TFT set 10 are broken. The synergy itself gives too much HP value, so get a Pantheon 3 with the Punk synergy, then give him War Mogs or any HP increasing itemization, and he will be very tanky because of the Guardian synergy. Senna is an amazing carry as a true damage synergy. You don't want to go for 6 rapid fire with no true damage. You want to go for 6 true damage and go for a flat AP Senna composition. So you want Shoujins for mana, Jewel Gauntlet for the damage output, Hextech Gunblade for healing, and you get attack speed from rapid fires to match the comp up. And Senna is definitely one of the stronger 2-cost 3-star carries that I would recommend building into if you guys had the opportunity. Seraphine is also a top tier 2-cost 3-star reroll carry that's paired with Gragas. You want to give her mana, which is Shoujins, and make sure to build into full damage like Jewel Gauntlet and Archangels. You need to make sure that the Seraphine ult one-shots the target it's shooting towards into. That is why it is very important to build full damage if you can, instead of healing like Hextech Gunblade. You can go for Twitch with attack speed itemizations or AD, but I do prefer the AD version, so we did recommend an IE Last Whispers Deathblade tech here. There is a lot of powerful 3-cost carries in set 10. Starting from here, we will see a lot more carry compositions, meaning that we can go for 3-cost 3-stars as our endgame instead of using them to build up for 4-cost or 5-cost 2-star. Amumu is a unit that does damage based on the armor he has, so it is usually beneficial to go for armor itemizations like Bramble Vest. However, I don't really recommend Gargoyles because right now Gargoyles is too weak. It doesn't really give as much armor as it should, so I do recommend any other chainmail itemization that gives Amumu more utility or value. Echo is a unit that is really strong as a 1-star or a 2-star, especially during the early game because his bling bonus mean that if you give Echo an item component while the true damage synergy is online, he heals 100 HP every second while his shield is up. So his shield usually lasts 4 seconds, so that's 400 bonus HP. However, his 3-star value isn't as tanky, so it's not really worth the economic investment, so just give him any tank itemization and then throw him away for a new carry during late game. We can give Lulu the full damage tech, which is Blue Buff, Archangels, and Jeweled Gauntlet to make sure that she can one-shot the enemy backline when she gets her rotation like online. And that's the same thing for Lux, but the different thing about Lux is that you don't really need a mana item. You want to use Lux's EDM synergy to shoot a secondary ultimate, and you want to buff that, so there is no emphasis in Lux ulting as frequent as possible. Miss Fortune has amazing attack speed scaling with Guinsus because her ultimate does provide an extra attack speed when it kills a unit. Going for an Armor Shred, Last Whispers, and a Crit Enabler, i.e. is really good for big shots, so this is how we itemize her. Now for Mordekaiser and Nico, they are a tank role, so if you have tank items, you can give them any tank itemizations, but they are not as efficient. Arguably, Nico could be nice with Warmogs because it does give a maximum HP scaling, but that's about it. Riven can be a monster if you give her the full crit tech with IE, Hand of Justice, and Quicksilvers, especially since she has great survivability with her ultimate. She also does benefit from Even Shroud so that you have the AoE Armor Shred around the Riven targets. And Samira has insane scaling with Runaan's Hurricane because her ultimate does also proc Runaan's. After that, you want Armor Shred into flat 80 increment with the Deathblade. There are a lot of items you can go on set, especially AP items such as Time Resolves, but I do recommend the Warmogs, Dragonclaw, Bramble Vesta, 3 tank itemization version. And for Urgot, you could also go for BT and Time Resolves, which is a tankier setup, but I do recommend going full damage with IE, Hand of Justice, and Quicksilvers. I do want Vex to one-shot her frontline while getting mana from the Emo synergy, so I went for a full AP tech onto the Vex. And for Yone, now Yone is actually a harder one because Yone actually needs CC immunity, extra tank value, lifesteal, damage, crit enabler, and attack speed. Right? So he needs so many resources. Usually, when you build into Yone, you need to have multiple support items like Banshees or Solaris to make sure that Yone is unkillable, and it is also recommended to have an Ornn artifact like Death's Defiance or so on. This is because Yone is a Hearthstone unit. He does have the potential to get you a lot of resources, and that is the only scenario where Yone is good, but otherwise, I do recommend not itemizing and using him as an extra. Now we're going to go into the 4 cost carries. You want blue buff on Ahri instead of Shojin's because even though blue buff and Shojin's gives the same mana, it's 2 auto attacks per ultimate, blue buff gives bonus damage. That's the reason why you want to go for blue buff on an AP carry. Then after that, we can go for scaling or we can go for healing. It can be Jewel Gauntlet or it can be Hextech Gunblade, but I do almost always recommend going for Archangels because the AP scaling is just too good. Akali is an interesting one. You want to make sure Akali has survivability, especially if it's KDA Akali. For those who don't know, KDA Akali is the one that dashes around the entire board, and true damage Akali is a range carry that throws shurikens while lifestealing. So I do like going for crits on both ones, like IE Hand of Justice is lifesteal and damage at the same time, so I do recommend that. But for the KDA dashing Akali, you want her to have more survivability, so I give her a Bloodthirsters. And for true damage Akali, the one that throws shurikens for damage, I do want her to have more damage output and sustainable damage, so I do give her a Quicksilvers or maybe an Edge of Night to keep her alive. For Blitzcranks, you can go for a typical 3 tank item setup, which is Warmogs, Bramble Vest, and Dragonclaw, but he also does work with stuff like Crown Guard and so on. For those who don't know, Blitzcranks is not tanky without Discos. He needs the extra regen, and he also needs Hextech Gunblade. So, like a Twist of Fate with Hextech Gunblade healing him as well too to go infinite. Otherwise, he does have a time limiter. He does eventually go down. Caitlyn just needs 1 mana item and 2 damage itemization to succeed, and interestingly enough, Israel excels well if you give him a blue buff and a rep buff. This gives him enough mana, and the 2 itemizations actually gives plenty of damage, especially combined with the Deathblade to take down your enemies. So when you're playing Karthus, you want 2 mana itemizations, and the reason is because number 1, Karthus has more than enough damage from the Pentakill synergy, and number 2, Karthus takes down weak units first, so you don't really need to deal 10,000 damage to a unit that has 100 HP, right? You just need to do 100 damage. So you don't need to focus on like erasing too much AP on Karthus. Just give him 1 Archangels and that will scale enough damage. He has crit value from his synergies. He has bonus damage from the Pentakill synergy. And if you just build into mana, he's going to take down the entire enemy team. In the case of Bebe, Bebe is really tanky as a bruiser. If you give her bonus attack damage and some like a survivability, which is usually Sterox, Time Resolves, and Bloodthirsters, she will survive long enough to deal enough damage while not dying. She can be tankier than Zac or Blitzcranks, never underestimate. Usually Thresh is not an item target, but if you have to give Thresh an item, then you do want to go for Adaptive Helm for the mana, Warmox to proc the Guardian synergy, and Protector's Vow so he can ult faster. For Twist Fate, you do need Archangels because Discos do fight for a long duration, and you want Hextech Gunblade so Twisted Fate and your team does not die too fast. The third item, Shojin's, was controversial. It can be more damage, it can be more mana, it can be statics for the MR Shred. Any itemization can fill the slot, no issues. For Viego, you do want a good balance between damage and survivability. Arguably, Viego has 2 damage synergies, so you can just build full tank value like Bloodthirsters or Time Resolves into like Hand of Justice or maybe Edge of Night. But I do prefer going for a strong boom, so I do recommend going for IE Hand of Justice into Quicksilvers. For Zac, actually, Adaptive Helm is one of the best items there is. You want AP, mana gain, and tank value, and Adaptive Helm is one of the itemizations that do give both. You want to go for an AP Zac more than a tank Zac because AP Zac does provide a lot of bonus damage and healing, especially the healing value is insane. Once his ultimate with EDMs like a proc off, so I do recommend that. And the most important thing is that you want EDMs. You have to put the EDM synergy and you have to put the EDM spat onto the Zac for it to become a useful unit. For Zed, I heavily recommend building into a survivability tech with Bloodthirsters and Edge of Night. You also need 1 IE so that he does not do 0 damage. Make sure to build into the Crowd Diver synergy so that the Zed can get the bonus damage output. Then you can watch Zed just slice down enemy teams while being very difficult to kill. Okay, we're going to talk about the 5 cost carries for this game. In the case of Qiyana, you don't need to worry about her itemizations, but her positioning is much more crucial. So if the enemy has a tank unit that's holding 3 tank items like Wormogs, Bramblevest, and Dragonclaw, then you put Qiyana right in front, and then Qiyana copies those items to your teammates after she ults the enemy tank carry. So make sure to put Qiyana right in front of the enemy tank. For Sona, usually the Guinsu Sona was a healing tech to make your team unkillable, but that no longer works. So you do want to go for a red buff Sona with Jewel Gauntlet, Archangels, Rabadons to one-shot your enemy team. Make sure to have Lulu and Ziggs right next to her to boost her mana intake. After that, we have Yorick, and I do prefer a bruiser damage Yorick, so build Yorick like you would build a Riven or a Yone. And for Ziggs, you just want to make sure Ziggs ults as much as possible, as fast as possible, so we have Shojin's and red buff, but the red buff can be replaced for Nashers or any other source of mana gain. Okay, for Illaoi, she is very versatile with the tank itemization, so just give any leftover tank item you have. It doesn't really matter too much. In the case of Jhin, you do want to have extra mana, and since Jhin cannot scale with attack speed, his attack speed is fixed, you do want to give him more mana gain itemizations like Shojin's. If you give him 2 Shojin's, he will ult every 2 autos, making sure that his violins will hurt ASAP. After 2 Shojins, just go for any damage amplifying itemization. In this case, it was a Deathblade. For Kayn, I don't really recommend going full damage, but full damage is the stronger version than just going for full tank value. But Kayn is stronger with Aura artifacts like Death's Defiance or Zanya's, so never forget that. For Lucian, I do recommend the attack damage version than the attack speed version, so instead of Guinsu's, going for Deathblade IE will have a lot more damage output altogether. Alright, that is the champion guide for set 10, and in future videos, I will show you guys the best augment combinations, the tier list for strongest compositions, good comp examples, and many more so on. Hope you guys enjoy and love set 10.